Ekaha.
One without a second.
One without a second.
Manasa.
Manasa.
The mind.
The mind.
Saha.
Saha.
With.
Anama.
Anama. No material name.
No material name.
Rupa.
Rupa.
Or material form.
Or material form.
Matra.
Matra.
Totally spiritual.
Totally spiritual.
Saha.
Saha. He.
Avyat.
Avyat.
May kindly protect.
May kindly protect.
Na. Us. Sarasat Paraha.
Sarasat Paraha.
Who is the cause of all causes.
Who is the cause of all causes.
Supreme cause.
The supreme cause.
Translation. The words and mind of the conditioned soul cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For material names and forms are not applicable to the Lord, who is entirely spiritual, beyond the conception of gross and subtle forms. The impersonal Brahman is another of his forms. May he by his pleasure protect us. Purport. The impersonal Brahman, which is the effulgence of the Lord, is described in this verse. End of purport. Vatya sukshu parati prapya ya eko manasasa anama rupas chinmatra so vyana sadasat paraha. The words and mind of the conditioned soul cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for material names and forms are not applicable to the Lord, who is entirely spiritual, beyond the conception of gross and subtle forms. The impersonal Brahman is another of his forms. May he, by his pleasure, protect us. Om Magyana Simranta Shah Gandana Salakya Chaksun Vitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Pangaiti Kirim Yatkripa Tadaham Vande Sri Gurun Dinatarinam Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Namaste Saraswati Devam Gaurvani Prachayani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachari Satayane Vancha
Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhudevascha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srimad Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
So, as you notice, Prabhupada did not give a very elaborate purport, or he precisely said what you need to say about the impersonal Brahman, namely nothing. Because it's nothing. Or it's not nothing, it's something. But it's what is impersonal Brahman actually? Well, it's not material, it doesn't have material form, it doesn't have material name, cannot be described by material words, it's beyond all material conception. What more can we say? And that's yeah. So I just found it striking that Prabhupada, I'm sure Prabhupada deliberately only gives one sentence in the purport, which I can interpret as his way of saying. I mean, that's actually all you can say about the impersonal Brahman. It's whereas if we have text about Paramatma, or even more so about Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality, probably he writes pages and pages and pages. Impersonal Brahman is a realization of the Supreme. You know that it's in the beginning of the Srimad Vadanti Tat Tat Vidas Tat Vam Yat Gyaram Atmayam Prameti Paramatmeti Bhagavan Iti Shabdati. That the same absolute truth, that's the point, there is only one absolute truth. And this absolute truth is realized in 3 stages for those who are knowers of the truth, as Brahman, the impersonal Brahman, as Paramatma, the super soul, and as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there is a realization of Brahman. Brahman does exist, or the Brahman aspect of the Supreme does exist. But then precisely what is it? Well, basically we can say, all we can say about Brahman is what it is not. It's that, it's a negative description. It's not material, doesn't have material form, doesn't have material name, cannot be described by material words. It's beyond material mind and senses and so on, which are very is accurate, And then this also applies to also Paramatma and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All these descriptions are true, but when we talk about Brahman realization, again, it is this negative. I think we even have this negativa via. I think that's
take what?
Negativa via. It's Latin. It's a theological expression, because they also in Christian theology and Western philosophy they also come to this point where they can understand that the absolute truth is beyond words, it's beyond names, beyond material form, and so on. So this description it's a negative description of the truth, and whenever one gets to discuss impersonal Brahman and impersonal philosophy or something like that, it's actually very, very difficult, because it's difficult to get an actual hold on what are we actually talking about. What are we actually talking about? We can understand it as, as devotees, when we understand that actually it's just a vague glimpse of the absolute truth. It's a first realization that what we see, that this material world, it's, at first glance seems so real, so concrete, so factual, but actually it is not. It turns out that it is, all these forms, well, there's something there, but it's not what it appears to be. There is what one actually realizes, everything is spiritual. That's impersonal Brahman, and that's something that, it's a first realization when one starts becoming so-called spiritual. One has a realization that everything is spiritual. Everything, everything is God. These words are used interchangeably: God and spiritual. Everything is God. Everything is spiritual. Yes, it's completely correct. But what does that mean? What are the implications? Why? And again, if this is not real, then what is real? Very little information is contained in this, but it is a definite realization. It's a beginning realization, and a genuine realization, a bona fide realization, but it still is the beginning. It should be the first realization, and then from there one should continue and come to Paramatma and Bhagavan. So the problem is when things are turned upside down, and Brahman becomes this impersonal Brahman. In Mayavad philosophy becomes the ultimate cause of all causes, or that this is the ultimate aspect of the Supreme. Again, we are talking about the same Supreme, so the impersonal Brahman is also, it's not wrong, it is the ultimate cause of all causes, but what is the nature of that absolute truth. So a problem comes when in Mayavad philosophy that this this realization that everything is inexplicable, beyond form and so on, that becomes the ultimate realization, and all other realizations are subordinate to that. That's a problem. That's a problem. This is where we criticize Mayavad philosophy. You have to understand there are actually two things: there are Brahmavadis and there are Mayavadis. And Brahmavadis are those who realize this impersonal Brahman, but they understand there's more. They just say this is our level. We haven't come, or they at least do not exclude as anything further. But Mayavadis are those who think that everything is Maya, including Krishna's form, Bhagavan, Paramatma, and us as eternal as souls and so on. It's all Maya, and only Brahman is true. That's a philosophical. This is philosophically very problematic. And there are these. I mean, Prabhupada does not always make this distinction, but in some places he makes this distinction between Brahmavadis and Mayavadis. Other places he doesn't. As in Nectar Devotion, he writes that the Kumaras at first they were Mayavadis, impersonalist Mayavadis. Actually, I mean, of course it depends on how we use words, and you see sometimes Prabhupada uses the same words a little differently. But if we make this distinction, Brahmavadi, Mayavadi, no, Kumaras were not Mayavadis, they were Brahmavadis. And when they got the chance to meet the personality of Godhead, and especially smell the tulasi leaves that had been offered to the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, then they became pure devotees immediately. That's a difference between a Mayavadi and a Brahmavadi. Brahmavadis, when they are exposed to the higher aspects of the absolute truth, the personal aspect, they immediately become devotees. They just haven't experienced it or have been exposed to it before. And Mayavadis, they are offenders, and therefore they will not. They're not even get in touch with the personal, and whenever they are exposed to any discussions like that, they will somehow or other their intelligence will refuse to. They cannot accept the idea that the absolute truth is personal, which of course also is quite inconceivable. It's when I'm trying to be rational, logical, it doesn't make sense that the absolute there's a truth. Actually, the truth is an eternal person, who has no cause, who has always been existing. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but I have to admit it doesn't make any sense to me actually. Am I wrong?
Beyond sense.
Beyond sense, is it beyond?
Beyond to your logic,
yeah.
To your reason.
The only problem is that all other alternatives, they're worse. Because one ends up with that there is a cause. There's obviously an ultimate cause, but one only has these two options. Either it's actually a person, the personality of Godhead, or it's the impersonal nothingness. Ultimately, it becomes a nothingness, and then you have something coming out of nothingness. This is absurd. This is completely absurd. So, out of the two, you might say, actually irrational, illogical possibilities, one has to choose one. There's only two options. There's only the personality of Godhead is there, or it's the impersonal, something impersonal. Either you call it impersonal Brahman or Buddhistic Nirvana, or modern science, they have the idea of, quantum nothingness or whatever, or something like that. But in any case, we have this that qualitatively, something qualitatively higher comes out of something that doesn't have qualities. Personality comes out of where there is no personality, and that is stupid. Krishna says that is stupid. Avyaktim yaktim apanam manyante mam buddhaya. That if you think that from the avyakta, the unmanifested, the vyakta, the manifested, has come, then you are abuddhaya, you have no intelligence. So, and so therefore I do not want Krishna to excuse me of being unintelligent, so therefore I have to accept that the personality of Godhead. It's yeah. So it is this paradox, and of course we are the frogs. We frogs in the well. We have really hard time accepting this. That that it's beyond our conception, or we cannot really completely grasp it with our rational intelligence. But we can grasp that we actually only have these two possibilities: the personality of Godhead, or some version of impersonalism. And impersonalism simply doesn't make sense. So the personality of Godhead must be there. That's but also it's one shouldn't be bewildered about that. It's just ultimately one has to realize, and that's maybe the most difficult thing to realize, that actually it's beyond our conception. We're tiny, and our logic and our faculties simply cannot completely grasp the absolute truth. This is very difficult to accept. But once one accepts that, this is Jiva Goswami's point, if you accept that Krishna is inconceivable, then you will understand. Then everything becomes conceivable. You just have to understand that the absolute truth is inconceivable. And so some that might seem also, no, but it's not a contradictory statement. It's a quality of Krishna, of the absolute truth, that he is inconceivable. And we can understand that, then we can understand so many things about the personality of Godhead. It makes complete sense. That's actually the thing about when one compares these two, the impersonalism versus personalism. In both cases, there is a threshold one has to get over. Existence is inconceivable, and that we always have to. That faces us actually every day for someone who is actually, philosophically minded. That's of course not always. We're not always philosophically minded. Speaking for myself, most of the time I'm more or less in animal consciousness. I'm just, I'm aware of the external needs, and I'm hungry and I'm tired, and I have all the pressing immediate things. He said this and she said that, and I have to do this and remember that, and we're just filled with all these, like immediate thoughts about the immediate world. But if sometimes one is philosophical and just simply meditates on existence and the fact that I am is completely bewildering. It's a puzzle. How can it be that I am? I think I mentioned that before, isn't it? It's something that's really worth meditating on. It's very puzzling that I am, because one sense we cannot deny that I exist. I cannot deny that I exist, but it's very bewildering that I exist. I should not exist. Again, it doesn't make sense that I exist. In my think I've said that before, but at least it's just in my logic. What should be there? Rational, there shouldn't be anything except a dark, empty space, and that's all, and no one to observe it. That makes sense. That's the only thing that should be there. And how anything comes out, how there's anything beyond that, this is actually complete mystery. That's complete mystery. But then I'm confronted with a paradox. I cannot deny there is something. At least I am there, and I should not be there. I should not be there. Rationally, I should not be here. But well, there I am. I am here. And so that is. So one can meditate on that, and then when you understood actually, there is this inconceivable fact of existence is that I am. From there on, anything else is not more inconceivable or fantastic than that, including God's existence. We already accepted, I always said my own existence, it is mystical. So God's existence, it doesn't make things, existence, more mystical, in one sense. This is at least how I kind of deal with this inconceivable mystical fact of Krishna's existence. But I can observe, if one is an empiricist, and I'm somewhat conditioned to be an empiricist, but empirically I can observe that I exist, and this is inconceivable. So it doesn't make it more fantastic that God exists. The point is, all evidence points to that He is there, and nothing else makes sense. It really doesn't make sense. And of course, we can also, by practicing devotional service, and we contact Him and we actually experience His presence. But also, logic, nothing else really makes any sense. For instance, impersonalism. You analyze impersonal philosophy, and you run into all kinds of contradictions. Actually, with personalist philosophy, you don't run into contradictions in that sense. There's this inconceivable fact that He must exist on. There's a causeless cause that has no, it's just always been there. This is pretty mind-blowing. But accepted, then everything actually falls into place. But that's not the case with impersonal philosophy. Impersonalists have an incredible hard time explaining that if everything is just oneness, and there's no, so why is there two-ness? Why is there duality? Why does two things exist? And then they will say, but this is just Maya, this is illusion. But then there is illusion, and then there is reality. Two things.
There's three things.
Even three things.
So many things.
Prabhupada, he makes, when he talks about the tradition of Shankara and the tradition of Mayavad philosophy, there's some long purports, and he takes Hamrita, where he's in one sense he's just, I think it's in the purport where it is about Shankara's life and how and the whole Shankarite tradition has arisen, and there he gets into details about there is actually many different branches. He established 4 monasteries, north, south, east, west. Shankara did that, and each of these monasteries, they have a particular mantra. They don't use the same. They have a different mantra needs, and they have a different mantra and different slogan, and they have different. And there's so much variety within this. You also when you come across that, isn't it? So probably in one sense he's kind of sarcastic. There's a sarcastic undertone when probably he writes, except that I guess it's useful information, but there's also a sarcastic undertone. There's so much variety within the, so if it's all one, why so much? different slogans. So why is that? Why is it so important? But there is, so impersonalism has this great problem of explaining. So what is this world? But it's illusion. It doesn't exist. Okay, but then there is illusion, and there is Brahman. That's two, and they get into who is illusions also. Is it Brahman that is illusion? No, Brahman cannot be under illusion. But what is the Jiva? But the Jiva he's a product of illusion. So how can he be illusion if he is a product of illusion? And if you press Mayavadis, which generally don't have a chance, because who is a Mayavadi nowadays? I mean, actually you have to be amongst devotees to really get some really good discussions of personal philosophy, because, I mean, maybe you can end up, I don't know, I've never really been exposed to that. We don't have here in the West. Maybe in South India you can find some good, solid, impersonalist philosophers, I don't know. And you could have a good debate with it. But I know that sometimes you just end up pressing someone and in the end you say, anyway, it's just words, it's beyond words, you cannot explain it by words. He was using so many words. Suddenly words just become meaningless. They were very meaningful before, when you had to explain impersonalist philosophy. Nowadays it's just meaningless. All words are meaningless. That means everything you're saying is meaningless if words just are meaningless. So it's very, very difficult. I mean, there's so many contradictions in Mayavad philosophy. And to really understand it, well, Krishna says it's troublesome, difficult. Kleshu dikataras tesham avyakta saktas tevasam avyakta hikatiya dukham dehavat bhyavat te. And he says here, for those, it's 12.5 Bhagavad Gita, for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of supreme advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. So this is Krishna says, it's difficult, it's troublesome, impersonal realization. There's also one thing you have to understand. Krishna is also, this is often symptomatic of someone who is refined in speaking and so on. They actually make understatements in Krishna. So when Krishna says something, it's difficult. It means it's his way of saying impossible. But he says it's actually it's difficult. Just like he says, Daiviki Sagunmani Mamaya Rajaya, that this divine energy of mind is difficult to overcome. Actually, the real word is impossible, but that's it's a cultured way of an educated way of speaking. You make actually understatements, so at least you kind of guard it. You don't make any fantastic claims which are easily defeated afterwards. So I mean, some word juggler might have. Krishna says it's completely impossible to overcome the modes of nature. So some word juggler might, of course, you cannot defeat Krishna's words, but Krishna, he also makes it, it's just difficult. No one can argue with that. It's difficult, but actually means it's impossible. Similarly here, also with the impersonal philosophy, it's very troublesome, and it's very